Welcome, everybody, to the Daily Objective. I'm with Seth Levine. Wait, is it Levine or Levine? I always think Adam Levine. I think that's how he pronounces it, right?
Yeah, it's I always get mixed up with these, ambiguous sort of pronunciation, but it is the commonly Levine.
Levine. Okay, that's what I thought. Seth Levine, and we are going to be talking about my collectivist age. In other words, when did you hear about objectivism? How did it affect your life? But also, how did you come to it? Your kind of story, and how did you maybe push out some of the negative things that were maybe already in your consciousness? Whatever. We're going to talk about when we came to it, the differences in different ages. I came to it a little bit earlier than Seth. We were talking about before the show, so I think I went through some of the things that he sees as the negatives. Which I agree with him now that I'm 36. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But tell us about your views in the super chat, or if you have a green, like Robert Ali, I will try to read your story. Like, how old were you when you first met Ayn Rand? Was there like a moment when you had a big revelation, not about Ayn Rand's philosophy, but about maybe how you were acting as you accepted it, acting in the world? So Seth, this was actually your idea for a show, and I think it's a great idea. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the setup?
Yeah, so I just think it's a fascinating topic. So I'm 42 now, just to give everyone context. I came to objectivism probably in my early to mid 30s, and it was it was just really kind of almost random how I came across it. Like, I came to so I didn't read Atlas Shrugged as a teenager and it blew my mind or anything, which is which is the common way, I think, or maybe the most common way. I came to it really. I had a friend, I was kind of into capitalism, I wasn't really into politics, but I just thought kind of very traditional left of center kind of view of the world. We need capitalism, but not too much. We should have a little bit of regulation because you can't let these people run free, yada yada. And I had a friend who just kept mentioning Ayn Rand, and I was like, what are you talking? And morality, and I was like, what are you talking about, right? So anyway, long story short, I ended up reading Philosophy Who Needed It, Philosophy Who Needs It, and that just blew my mind. I was like, wait, everyone needs a philosophy, and I don't know what mine is. That seems really important. So anyway, I came to Rand kind of at that stage, kind of coming into it from the nonfiction, and it wasn't until later that I read the fiction, and really my focus was on how do I fix the ideas in my head. Mm-hmm. And kind of doing that, I spent maybe 10 years or so really unwinding and rethinking almost everything that I believed, and it was really hard. So mm-hmm. When it just brings a different perspective, I think, to when I interact with people, kind of the psychological motivations behind people.
Yeah, I came to objectivism a little bit earlier in my life stage. I was I think 17 when I first read The Fountainhead, and no, it actually didn't I liked it, but it didn't have the explosive, feeling that a lot of people describe. But I did, once I read Atlas Shrugged a few years later, I had actually read We the Living before that, and then Atlas Shrugged. That's when it came to me. That's when and then her nonfiction, and then I got more and more and more into it, and it started blowing my mind more and more. But one of the things I think you seem to be reacting to is a common experience we have as those of us who not only read Ayn Rand, think about her ideas, but then interact with other people who have on a wide scale. People we might think of as in the movement. So, there's a lot of people who've read Ayn Rand, been influenced by her, and never meet another objectivist, really. And because she sells millions of books, right? And there are not millions of people who are considering themselves objectivists in any real sense. They like Ayn Rand. They think she's great, and that's awesome. I think that's wonderful. But when if you are, for whatever reason, you get more into the philosophy, you like the philosophy, you dig into it more, and then you might go to conferences and groups and meetups, you might meet people. And the question then is, Seth, what I think you're talking about is like, what life stage is that person at, and how has it, how is it manifesting in that individual at this moment?
Yeah.
So if you were to meet me at like 19, I was the most obnoxious objectivist. I was the stereotype, 100%. Someone would argue with me politically, and what I literally one of the first times this happened I went to a junior college to start, and we had some political discussion in a writing class, and like I was so angry, and I went home and I typed up this essay, and I basically though I just kind of like copied and pasted, like quoted Man's Rights by Ayn Rand and like mass. And I gave this guy this tome of a paper that I wrote to kind of explain, and he would just look at me like, the hell is happening? Like the next day, right? It was so weird. And just all things like that. And, because I just learned about it. I didn't know anything about ideas until.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, like I come across people, in all sorts of places, objectivists or not. And like, to a lot of people, I find like they find the ideas of objectivism obvious, like, oh, this is like, obviously we need capitalism, or obviously like,
I don't like it when people say that, by the way.
Huh?
Personally, I don't like it when people say that, but go ahead.
Yeah. But it's, it's like they treat like, oh, this is such a terrible idea, and yeah, it's like, you're not wrong in the analysis of like this specific thing, but like coming from discovering it later in life, and like I didn't just discover it, like I really spent a lot of time integrating it. Like it resonated with me, and I went like all the, like I was all in on it. I mean, there was like a decade in my life where like maybe less than that, but still like all I was reading was Objectivism. I read like all the nonfiction books, then and I read, the fiction too, but like not, just sort of as like a break almost, I even read like, Ayn Rand's letters. Like it like really impacted my life. And why I was so deep and it took so long is I realized like I had all these ideas that were predicated on other ideas. And so I had to keep, basically, if I wanted to be consistent, I had to keep untangling all these ideas. It's like, all right, like I believe in capitalism. Like, why? Okay, because obviously the world is great and we need it, but we can't have deregulation. Like we need someone, right, to kind of make sure greed doesn't get out of control. But like that's a premise, and then you have to go on to that one. And so I feel like so now, like when I interact with people, I just realize that like unless you're like even an objectivist, like you can even be an objectivist and not have integrated Rand's ideas. Like I come across this, I don't want to say a lot, but I have come across people who like are fans of Rand, but they haven't really integrated the ideas all the way down to like an actual percept, for example. So
do you think they have to?
I don't, well, it depends. Like, what is your goal? Like, if to understand the philosophy, I think yes. To use it to improve your life, I don't think so. I think, I don't think you necessarily have to. But when I come across and like people are arguing, like for certain points, I take like politics, for example, like you have to understand who you're arguing with has like this crazy complex context that is different than yours. And to bridge those two is like very difficult. And like some people have like really misintegrated, to use like kind of Peikoff terms, very misintegrated views. And some people have like very disintegrated views. And I find that like the better people, kind of like the general population is just more or less misintegrated in a sense. Like they're not bad people. Like they see what you see, but like the context is just like there's so much context like behind it. Like imagine what you need to get free markets. Like how many fans of capitalism are there in America, but how many fans of laissez-faire capitalism are there in America? Like the laissez-faires are like just tiny compared to capitalism, which to me is like the pro-capitalist per se, which to me is just like how do you separate those two, but then I remember like I was one of those people, and what that required was the whole integration of objectivism, of going down from the political to the moral to the metaphysical in a sense. And like, most people aren't even aware that there are choices for these things. So I'm always like fascinated by it.
Well, okay, so it seems like you're talking about a couple of things here. So there's when you adopted or first learned about objectivism.
Mhm.
Then there's how you and how much you study and integrate it into your broader life. And then there's the persuasive element of communicating with another person
Mhm.
who might be at a different, have a completely different context, understanding, knowledge, experience in the world, belief system, epistemology, metaphysical view that are very different and contra your own.
Yeah.
And there's a gap in your persuasion when you're trying to talk to them. And I think
Yeah.
they are very distinctively different perspectives or ideas that you're talking about now. So go ahead.
Let me integrate them for you, right? Because this is I think the integrating point that I haven't met. The age I find in my, at least as it pertains to me, the age at which I came to objectivism impacted how much unwinding of previous contexts that I had to do, such that now, like, I see that, like, if like you came to objectivism at 19, right? So the amount of just into mental development between you at 19 and you now is like, there's more, right? I don't know how much more, but there's definitely more. So,
Well, I'm basically 19.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, the older we go and we get, and the more experiences we have, the more context we have, right? Like the more.
Well, but that context could be in the wrong like in the wrong avenue, even if you come to objectivism early. So, like, if your premise was correct, like, then anybody who read Ayn Rand early would then automatically become, a great thinker in their 30s and 40s. And this is the issue.
That's not true. Yeah.
Exactly. That's definitely not true.
That's interesting too. Yeah.
Because the issue here, so age, so one, I wouldn't say that age is the primary factor. I mean, you do need time in order to think through these issues or not, right? Or to go thinking through other issues and evading certain issues. And there's a whole skew. So, like, what makes you unique was not that you were 30 when you learned Ayn Rand, was that you went with a clear conscience to want to understand and integrate, or not, as honestly as possible, this radical new philosophy. So you could do that at 15. I mean, there's no reason why, and 15-year-olds do it all the time. Yeah. Now, are they going to get it to the same level of high abstraction and integration of all these concretes that you at 30, because you've had so many examples? Like, for instance, you need to have a history in order to really understand morality, I think. Like, and I mean your own history. You could study history, but you have to know, like, when I was 18, 19, I was selling stuff. I would sometimes bend the truth a little bit to get my way. And then I'd get a screaming customer. Well, I have to know that. I have to learn, like, that honesty pays, but it's good to be honest because I'm getting this person pissed at me. Or, like, look at the way I behaved with this girlfriend. Well, why did she break up with me? It's her fault, right? No, it's my fault. I did this, I did X, I did Y, Z. You need to have those types of experiences at work. You need to meet people. You need to talk to them. You need to see them behave over time. I mean, so I agree that time is a fundamental factor because that's just, how existence works, and you have to do that. But age doesn't. Some people are really good at it, really smart, and they get it really early. And I think like Ayn Rand got it pretty early. Like, she invented it, right? And so she was like 9 or 10 when she got it. Now, what I do think you're experiencing is something we all experience, where in our youth, when we're young, there is an obnoxious behavior that can occur often with anybody who accepts or learns a new radical idea. I mean, you could see this with Christians, with libertarians, with anarcho-capitalists, with leftists, with Republicans on Turning Point. Like, they could be so annoying and they don't listen. They don't care what you think. I think that is a common trait of a lot of young people. Not all. Some, a lot of people are like old souls right away, and they're like very mature and wise, and they're like so it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, if I've
just
learned
not as
anything,
likely.
Yeah, if I've learned anything from Twitter, is there's shortage of obnoxious people. Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who learned Ayn Rand and read Ayn Rand for the first time in their 30s, and they were worse than anybody. And not just in terms of like being didactic, but I mean in terms of evasiveness and so again, the age I think is not the issue. It's the soul, the character, and the choice that you make to think through or to evade.
Do you think there's a quantity of context that makes it harder maybe as you're older? Because now I see your point as maybe it can be also hard when you're young too, because you don't have certain experiences. It may be hard to it may be hard. Like you can't integrate certain experiences because you haven't had them yet. That's
100%. Yeah, you can't integrate what you haven't had. And I think one of Leonard Peikoff's life goals, he has stated, besides like disseminating and thinking about and expressing, was to eradicate rationalism among objectivists. Right. The idea of rationalism, which was, that to me was one of the biggest revelations of my experience, was his courses where he talked about understanding objectivism and not doing it rationalistically. And part of that means acknowledging, his course hammers home over and over and over and over again, the whole idea of integrating by really looking at and thinking through it. So like if anybody believes that they have achieved a knowledge of objectivism, I think they're misunderstanding themselves, because I'm in an OPAR group. I'm a graduate of the 4-year program of the OAC. I was trained by Dr. Ankar Gate and all these people. Alex Epstein edited my first paper. I worked for him. I've had Ben Bayer edit my papers and rip them apart in a beautiful way. And I'm in a group right now, an OPAR group right now, where Dr. Ben Bayer's, comes out and hangs out sometimes because he's here in Austin, although he can't, he's so busy, he doesn't do it all the time. And I'm always blown away that, I'm 36. I've been reading this stuff since my early 20s. And I'm still like, damn, I don't know. I didn't understand that at all. Yeah. Or I forgot something and he's just blowing my mind all the time again.
Yeah.
And and even though I've read it for a lot of times.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting. Just thinking about what you were saying, rationalism, objectivists or not, whatever your belief is, but just rationalism may be the biggest public enemy number one, right? Because even just believing, taking an idea and you kind of have to do it, right? Imagine yourself I have kids, my kids have to believe certain things I say, based on their own survival, right? They have to trust me on certain ideas, because they don't have the context.
Well, they don't have to, but you can make them. Well, because it is for their own survival, whether they understand it or not. Right?
Yeah,
don't run out in the middle of the street. I'm going to rip you away from the street if you do.
Exactly. Right.
And it's they want to, and it's they hate it. No, let me. But I almost got hit when I was young, but because I was riding my tricycle, my dad ran out and ripped me away because the truck almost hit me. And it was I didn't want that.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to have,
So it's you kind of start with this mixture of it feels maybe when you're born. I have no idea. I'm just going off a tangent here. So feel free to rip me apart in the chat, everyone. But it feels when you're born, you're kind of dealing with this mixture of own experience, observation, and rationalism in a sense where you believe, you're taught certain things and you follow those things, but you don't have the firsthand experience to actually test, to know that those things are true in a sense, to integrate those things. And then as you get older, you can sort of integrate a bunch of ideas,
Well, I do think that's a complex thing because we're talking about early education. So if we're talking about Montessori and things like that, you don't need that much to integrate that fire was burned. You don't need that many experiences. Right, that fire burns, so that this breaks your leg if you fall off out of a tree of a certain height.
How about don't hit your sister?
Yeah, exactly. And I think those are challenging things to deal with as a parent, and those are parenting things that to some degree a child may not care or want to address, and so this is a whole nother. I think this is a whole nother question, to be honest.
Okay.
It has to do with, how do you use those opportunities as a parent to educate and train your child, but, in a way that allows them to then eventually understand for themselves. Right. And there is a communicative method that Montessori, Haim Ginott, these people have advocated for that I think are useful. And at the same time, there's a point when you just have to say no as the parent, Jordan Peterson calls it, you are stand in for reality for your kids. I think there's some truth there where it's reality will kill your kids, but they don't know it. So you are reality in that sense. You're kind of the block.
Yeah.
But that's a little different than like, a 20-year-old getting this and then integrating it over time. Because again, they can choose to integrate it. They can, work to not integrate it. Like you're saying, like misintegrating or disintegrate it, or, integrate it into some weird amalgamation to make themselves feel better.
Right.
And it doesn't actually have anything to do with what Rand was trying to say.
True. Yeah, no, it's true. But it's like, I'm thinking like almost like, oh, like if you're 19, right? Like you have ideas about the world, right? And
yes,
if you have the wrong ideas about the world, you have not integrated them, right? Like you've not integrated certain ideas about the world. You are basically either you're misintegrated, which means you're rationalistic to some degree, right?
Well, I think rationalism. So just to clarify one thing about Peikoff's point, I think rationalism is not like a state that you hit or don't hit. It's a process that all of us are guilty, or is easy to be part of our thinking process at all times or at any time. Like it's something like, oh, look, that's a rationalistic statement. I didn't concretize that properly. I didn't logically connect that to something. I don't really understand what I mean by this.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like a thing to have in your mind of like, beware of rationalism and like look at it as like a precept of thinking. Is how I look at it personally. Now, I'm not saying that's what Peikoff said exactly. He's much smarter and better at it than I am.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking like, right, because like you have to operate, right? Going back to like philosophy, who needs it, right? You have to operate on certain ideas. And like I realized like hadn't, like, for example, like capitalism, I hadn't integrated capitalism, right? I essentially,
I don't know that I learn all stuff all the time. I listen to
but
Yaron Brook show all the time. And I'm like, oh shit.
But I was operating on these premises, which means like I had like rationalistically accepted certain ideas. Right. So I had to go back and like confront those ideas. Right.
Oh, yeah.
So like what I'm saying, like even the child, like my kids have to accept certain ideas without being able, from me, they don't have to, but like you try and coax them and you try and, like your point is like, I try and integrate certain ideas for them. Like don't hit your sister, but like it's, at a certain age, like it's so hard to convey that, right? We're like, he has to, like, if my son, like, for example, accept the idea, like, I'm gonna just hit my sister however I want, kind of like rationalistically, right? Because you don't really there's no, in my view, proper integration of where that's acceptable. Then like later on, if you address
is it acceptable to hit your sister? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know.
Like if you integrate it properly, there is I guess like if she's beating you up,
there's no way to integrate that properly.
Okay.
There's no way to integrate that it's okay to like hit your
if you can come up with a syllogism where it works, then you can hit your sister.
And that's my point. But that would be based off of some kind of rationalization, right?
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? Right. Yeah. So like,
well, but I don't think kids operate that way. Like it's part of what makes them children, according to Aristotle. So I've never had kids. I don't know. I've taught kids, but they are like the beings of now, the beings of pure desire in a sense. Like they're very impulsive. And part of what you're trying to do with education is take those moments to show them how to think through them, so that when they're there and they're ready and they have a fully formed conscious, which I think isn't done at like 5, it's a long process. Then, our brains aren't even, frontal cortex aren't even developed till 25, for God's sakes, which is why I tell people don't get married before 25. But because you might be making too much. It's not to say you can't do it. Anyway. So, but yeah, I think it's when you're talking about integrating and they're not fully integrated, I mean, that's, I think it's clear that a kid is not fully integrated.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I don't know. Like, again, I guess to me, I would just always go back to like doing the guidance. Like I always look at them as a teacher as moments of guiding or moments of like modeling what you want them to eventually do. And then kind of showing them through reason, like using reason for everything. Right. And explaining to them so that in the hopes, because they're beings of free will, or they will be, in the hopes that one day they will have that mechanism trained sufficiently to make those decisions on a daily basis, which is very hard. So a couple super chats I did want to read real quick.
Yeah, Roland, what other people think about.
There's a lot of stuff in the chat. Sorry, I haven't been reading as much. So, I'll be Roland said, I'll be Objectivist 19 this summer. I think he means 19 years since he did it. All right. Ali Beard for me, because watching Supernatural allows the actors on Twitter. For me, because watching Supernatural, follow the actors on Twitter, see all the what the hell is Mark talking about after. Okay, I don't know what that's saying. Sorry, I can't read all of these. You guys are awesome, but keep them coming. If you have anything relevant, I would love to see it.
Yeah, thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat too.
Yeah, thank you, Bonnie.
52 soon. That's awesome. And I'm glad that you like this topic. That's right. Yeah. Robert said that he read The Fountainhead in high school and thought it was a great story, and but not paradigm shifting. It's funny. I had the same thing, Robert. Like, I had someone, like a boss, give it to me. I was an engineer at the time. He gave it to me when I was 22, and like I hated fiction at the time. I love it now, not surprisingly. And I remember I read it and I was like, I actually thought like Peter Keating was like the better character. And like, I thought it was like a good story about like architecture. And I was like, yeah, I didn't think much about it. And like, I could tell like he expected me to have some reaction. I was like, yeah, it's a good book.
Well, that's a good example.
And then I reread it like in my mid-30s. I'm like, this is the best book I ever, like, it's my favorite book. It's like the best self-help book. Like, I just love it. Like, it's my favorite piece of art is like The Fountainhead. It's so interesting. Like, how over those years, like I literally had like a complete 180 kind of like, well, not quite 180, but close to it.
Yeah.
I think it also reflects my psychology at the time too. Yeah.
Well, so this is a good thing for us maybe to end on. This is something I'm passionate about because I know exactly what you're talking about. And I think Rand, she made an analogy about free will as being, kind of, I don't remember exactly the analogy. But it's not so much a light switch as like a dimmer switch, I think, or maybe that was Peikoff, where you could be more and more dim. In other words, more focused or less focused. It's not an on or off thing where you're not at all focused. You're a little bit focused. When you're like reading something. And I think reading is a good example of this. How could somebody read something like The Fountainhead? I come up with something radically different than some, Vox editor who says he actually read it and then comes up with this monstrous philosophy. And I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen there. But one thing that you're pointing out that I think is possible is that, we don't like reading is not easy. In it, that itself is not, especially a complex novel like that. Because I had a similar reaction when I first read it. I liked it, but I was not blown away. And part of the reason why I think is because I was not used to reading great novels or great ideas. And it takes work to like really like not fade in and out when you're reading and just kind of glance over, speeches they make or certain conclusions or certain like observations and concretes that the artist is drawing. And I don't actually connect them with anything or think about them. I just kind of see, oh yeah, look, crazy woman, guy that's blowing stuff up. And oh, it's fun. I liked him. He had some great things to say about art and I like art. Beautiful. End of story. And then you read it and you're like, holy crap. That's why you could read something throughout your life and get different things and understandings from it over and over.
I mean, everything, even Rand talking on art, right? Everything is there for a reason, right? There's nothing that doesn't have to
in great art. Yeah.
In great art. Yeah.
There's some art where it's like, I think this person was just high on something and just did it randomly. Okay. So my Objectivist Age, last thoughts, of Seth on what we've all taken away. And then I'll do a quick little shout out for upcoming shows.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating because just my own recognition of what it's taken to integrate, kind of the philosophy and the amount of work that I've done has really made me appreciate kind of other people's perspectives better and maybe their lack of integrated views on things because I sort of know what it takes and other people, a lot of people aren't even at least I certainly wasn't like aware of the choice, kind of the mental choice there. So, it's given me just kind of understanding kind of my views, kind of giving me more empathy towards other people, even the obnoxious ones in a lot of ways. But I think it's
on this. I agree.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you meet the obnoxious young objectivists, and you're also a little bit more understanding of their position, and that is something that comes with age, I think, that's a big part of something that comes with age. I mean, it's
that's fair, but yeah, that's fascinating. Seeing what's going on in the chat and everyone's sort of experiences with it too. So, and last thought is like this journey doesn't end until they wheel you out in the pine box. So
exactly, you should always be integrating. And that's why you need these guidances of how to think, because I don't know why I'm doing the crazy.
There you go. ABI, right? We have a new slang term. Always be integrating.
Yeah. Well, that thinking is integrating, as Peikoff said it, and the choice of humanity is to think or not to think.
Yeah, that's true.
And I agree with that. I think those are good precepts, good ideas to hold in your mind and to always do. So, okay. So upcoming shows at 7 p.m. UK time. Enjoy Parenting with Lisa Van Dam and Kyle Steele at 10 p.m. UK time. Where there you could ask some of the questions that we brought up, as me not having kids and knowing very little about parenting, and Seth Levine.
Yeah.
Dang, I was like, Levine, having good thoughts about what we should be doing as parents and some ideas there. Ask if you had questions, come back and talk to Lisa and Kyle about that. And then at 10 p.m. UK time, Life on Earth with Robert Nasser and Amy Nasser, Productiveness, Vacations, Rourke, and Wynant. So I think they're going to be talking about productiveness, vacations, which I think I need, and Rourke and Wynant.
That's a fact. I mean,
although Ocon's coming up, baby.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you one thing that totally struck me was how Rourke used vacation productively. So that's going to be an interesting topic. Oh yeah, and it's in the Fountain. See, got to reread the Fountainhead. There you go.
No, I mean, I guess I didn't know of it as he used it productively. I wouldn't put it. I do know that scene. It's a beautiful scene. Anyway, so that's a question for Robert and Amy. So go talk to them. Enjoy their show, and I thank you guys all for joining. And thank you, Seth. And hopefully, I'll have a show with you again in the future.
Yeah, we'll see. And yeah, everyone, have a great rest of your week.
All right, take care.
Bye. ABI.